So we're winding down the day here in Redmond, Washington. I've been noticing the internet has a lot of questions, some that were not answered and some that were just posed about the Xbox One. Whether or not it is still an always online console, if it's always on, and a new report that came out from Wired that when you install the game, it goes to the hard drive with a unique code that then you have to purchase if you want to install it a second time. With this in mind, I got a chance to sit down with Matt Booty, who oversees the Redmond studios here, to get answers not only on that, but a better appreciation of what we learned today with the announcement of the Xbox One. Matt, thank you so much for your time. I know this is something of a big day. So this is the end of the day, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to sort of bring up some stuff that has been happening. My Twitter feed has been a little on the insane side. In terms of this report that's been coming out, I believe in a Wired article, and then there was a comment by Phil Harrison, in terms of there being sort of a one-time installation of a game onto the hard drive on the Xbox One, that then there's a successive payment if you want to install it on another one. What is the current statement as to the existence or non-existence of that?
So as far as I know, Larry Herb has come out and put a statement that the content is attached to your profile. So when you install that at home, it's your game, you'll be able to play that. Anybody in your family, within your household, will be able to play that. If I come over to your house and I play with my profile, then I'm going to be able to use that game. If you want to play with your profile, that's as if you're buying the game. So we'll have more details about how that could work, but I think the key thing that we've clarified today is that when you buy a game, it's attached to your account and your profile, and you're going to be able to play that wherever you go.
Okay, so just to clarify, the game license, the code, whatever you use, is unique to your profile, not to the hard drive that you've installed the game on.
That's right, and Larry's come out, there's been a lot of stuff flying around today, as you mentioned, and he's come out and clarified that.
And then with that in mind, there's two different terms out there, always on and always online. If you could sort of speak to both. Is the system always on? To some degree?
So I think like any modern consumer device, that it's got different power states, right? Because nobody necessarily wants something on if you're not using it right then. So it's got a low power state, but as we saw today with Yusuf, there's enough of it always on that it'll be able to respond instantly. So when you walk and say Xbox on, it's going to come to life. And I think that's the same as a laptop or a phone that goes into a low power state. And so like most modern consumer electronic devices, Xbox One is designed to be smart. So if you're not using it, it's going to power down. You don't need a space heater in your living room, but when you're ready to play games, it's going to turn on instantly and be ready to go.
And obviously that was demonstrated by sort of saying Xbox on, something you cannot do with Kinect, with the 360, that there has to be some juice that must be flowing into the system.
Right. And like I said, like a laptop that might go into a sleep mode, or the way your phone turns the screen off, when you're ready to use it and ready to play, it's going to respond. And it's definitely always listening to you, so that Xbox on, and it's going to wake up and be ready to go.
Now that brings us to what is probably the greater concern for the core gamers out there, which is the notion of always online. That really wasn't addressed specifically in the presentation today. Is there any sort of clarity as to whether or not you have to have a persistent internet connection, or just an internet connection that offers sort of a handshake to just kind of verify that there is something?
Yeah, that's another topic where there's been a bunch of stuff flying around, and I would probably look to what our official update through the day is. What I'll say is that we definitely designed Xbox One to take advantage of everything that the internet has to offer, and everything that being ready and connected can bring. So in terms of automatic updates, in terms of expanded content, obviously multiplayer, online play, the power of the cloud. These are all the great advantages of the internet. I think we've gotten a little hung up today on some of the details, and is it 2 minutes or 2 hours? And I like to think more about all the advantages that an internet connected device are going to bring to a console.
I mean, so if you sort of look at it, I mean, in terms of the idea, and I think there was a memo that was out there maybe a couple weeks ago, if you have a truly solitary single player experience, would that be requiring an internet connection?
I think we're going to, so in the absence of any internet connection, you're going to be able to play Blu-ray movies, and there are likely going to be some game modes that you'll be able to continue to play. But again, the Xbox One was really designed to take advantage of the modern era where people have got, high-speed internet, where it's just all the advantages that it brings in terms of the power of the cloud, knowing what your friends are doing, online play, everything else that goes along with having an internet connection.
Yeah, there are so many things that we were presented with in unbelievable 60 minutes. We had all the stuff that happens with TV and swapping between games and that, a lot of stuff about the cloud, about being able to record your gameplay and the sharing mechanisms. Will all of this be available at the launch of the console, and also will it be exploited by the content in the games and many other things out there?
Great. I'll break that down into two questions
Sure.
that you asked. So the first one is that at launch we want Xbox One to be an amazing experience. So you should expect that things that we showed today are going to be available when you go buy one and put it in your living room. In terms of what's to come, I think as we saw in this last generation, when I think back to some of the games that were there, day one launch of Xbox 360, and then I compare the graphics, I compare the online features to where we're at 7 years later. I mean, some of the stuff that you're able to do in games today back then would have been science fiction, right? It was just like in terms of the rendering techniques, the technologies, where we've gotten with some of the online play, just even in terms of where the Xbox Live service has advanced and some of the apps that we've got. So we should expect that 6 months from now, there's going to be things that you can do on Xbox One, and then a year from now, even more things you can do, more advanced things. I mean, I really think that with this next generation that we're going to get into a time where the device is sort of the starting point, the console, Xbox One is a starting point, and we're just going to keep growing from there. It may be a little bit of a stretch to say, but this may be the last console that you ever need to buy.
With the television, which I thought was so impressive at the beginning, not just how Kinect works with it, but just how fluid it was to seem to move between the two. Was that a real-time demo that was feeding in sort of television that was out there? I don't know what the service would have been.
Yeah, one of the most exciting things about Xbox One, and this really gets to the advantage that we have of being part of the bigger Microsoft, and you heard Mark Whitten talk about this, is that instant switching that you saw is really enabled by a sophisticated operating system which is bridging sort of two things that need to happen at once. On the one hand, you've got an operating system designed to run core AAA games, things that need to talk, right to the metal, right? And you want as little in the way between the game and the hardware as possible. On the other hand, you've got an operating system that has a different goal of being instantly ready, that you want to be able to do different kinds of things that are more attached to what we would think of as the Windows kernel, but I want to be able to get to those instantly. And Skype was a great example that we saw earlier. And the thing that enables that is the piece that sits in the middle, which is kind of a supervisor part of the operating system that allows those two things to coexist and allows those things to talk to each other. And that's what enables the instant switching that you saw. And also can respond very quickly to the input coming from Kinect or a controller or smart glass and other things. So it's a very exciting part of the console, and I think it is going to be one of the bigger differentiating points of Xbox One, because that same operating system layer that allows a core game system and a more instant response kind of a Windows-based layer on that can also open up doors to bringing content that would run across the Microsoft family of devices. So my Windows 8, Windows Phone, that really is kind of the key to that. So I think that as we go forward over time and as developers get their hands on it, as we see more of a convergence across the Microsoft family of devices, that operating system approach is really going to pay dividends down the road for us.
Now, the way that that's set up, so it looked like the menu for the television was unique to the Xbox dashboard. But it would have to be bringing in your cable service, because it sounds like you still have to have your cable service. Do you still have to have your cable box, or can you go directly into the Xbox One?
So Xbox One will curate and expand and build upon your existing TV service. So whether you have a satellite service or a cable service, it will take that as an input, and then it will display that and layer on top of that. As I'm sure you can imagine, even outside of the United States, TV delivery is a pretty complicated affair, and it can be different in different parts of the world. So we want to enable anywhere that we sell Xbox One there to be live TV content, but that's going to depend on what service provider you've chosen for that TV content. So think of it as HDMI in, and then we're going to add a bunch of expanded capabilities and curation on top of that, but you're still going to need your device that you've got, whether that be a satellite or a cable box or however it is that you get TV into your home.
And in particular for such apps as HBO Go, which currently does require that you already have the subscription through your cable provider or your satellite, that still stays.
Yes, that's correct. And that would be, HBO Go is a great example, but around the world, there's dozens and dozens of different ways, some of which are free, some of which are subscription. There's different apps. Some of them actually require, that you're connected to a service provider. Some of them are standalone. And our goal is to enable all of those, but it will depend on the relationship you've got with that service provider.
And then, of course, not to be content with what other people are making, probably one of the more surprising aspects of the presentation today was the announcement of originally produced content, namely Spielberg connected to Halo.
Yeah.
How significant an investment is Microsoft making in this? I mean, that is definitely new territory, doing sort of linear, digitally distributed, creative content.
Yeah, well, I think as you've seen with our commitment to things like Forward Unto Dawn, that was also part of the Halo world, that we are as committed as anybody could be to the Halo franchise. And everything from the core game itself, but more importantly around that, the world of Halo, the characters of Halo, the scenarios and the fiction of Halo, that enables everything from Halo toys to Halo books that are on the bestseller list to linear content like Forward Unto Dawn. And I think it is exciting and it makes perfect sense, and it's exactly what Halo fans want, to expand that into other places like a linear TV show. So in terms of what's our commitment, it's big, it's full, and we are 100% behind Halo as a franchise going forward.
Now, independent of Halo, because that was the only one that was discussed, are we looking at something that would be a legitimate competitor to Netflix or the original content coming off of Amazon, or many of the digital studios that are out there? I mean, if it's not just Halo, could it be something that isn't even attached to an existing Microsoft franchise?
Yes, I think so. And as we heard this morning, Xbox One was really designed to be an all-in-one entertainment system. So that's everything from movie and music and apps to games, to casual games, to digital games, to retail games. And in that spectrum of entertainment would be linear content that's tied to a gaming franchise. There could be linear content that is perhaps more integrated with a gaming franchise, some that might be more standalone in the world, and then you could just see original linear content that could come to the service. So without getting into particulars, I think you could expect that everything in between there is stuff that we would want to enable and see come to Xbox One.
And you mentioned the other word that we haven't discussed yet, games.
Yeah.
So obviously today was lighter on the games with the emphasis to come at E3, and that had been announced ahead of time, which I think is important to point out. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, by going so light on games, one of the questions I had is, who was the presentation for? I mean, it is early in the morning, or relatively early in the morning on the West Coast, and people are going to probably make a point of watching who really know Xbox as a gaming service, as a console, where Halo, where Gears of War came from.
Yeah.
This obviously was speaking to a much different audience. I'm kind of getting a sense of who was the presentation really aimed squarely at, because a lot of the gamers out there, for right or wrong, felt a little bit alienated and left out of the conversation.
Yeah, well, we certainly, with Xbox One, want to include as many people as possible, and core gamers definitely are an audience that we want to include, embrace, and be excited about Xbox One. I think you mentioned it earlier that, here it is, we're having this conversation, and earlier in the day some things happened and it's already out on the internet, so news travels fast. So to your question about what time of the day was the presentation, and I don't know that that's so important, because I think that the information will travel fast, it will get out, and we'll find a way to talk to people throughout the day, whether they got the information when it was live or whether it happened over the internet later in the day. So I think our goal is to get this out to as broad an audience as possible. The way that your question comes across is almost as if there's a choice between the two, between a core gamer and somebody who's interested more in entertainment. To me, the exciting thing about Xbox One is we don't have to make that choice, right? Xbox One was designed from the ground up to be a box that will be amazing at playing core games. It is going to be, a huge step forward for games and graphics, interactivity, physics, online play, all the things that are great for core games. And it also so happens that a box that can do that well will also do entertainment well. It'll also play movies well. It'll do a whole host of other things. If we had to choose between the two, if there was a knob on the front where, is it on entertainment setting or game setting, then I'd be a little worried, right? But lucky for us is that we don't have to do that. We saw with Yusuf today that it's as easy as Xbox, go to Internet Explorer, Xbox, play music, Xbox, play game, and it instantly switches between those. So, we built Xbox One to appeal to a very broad audience. It is an all-in-one entertainment system. It will do core games. It will also play movies and play music. It will also enable apps. It will also enable digital games. It'll bring, even games from independent developers. I mean, we certainly look to include all the full spectrum of developers, from people doing AAA retail releases all the way to some of the smaller, more independent developers that we work with.
I completely see where you're coming from, but I can just say, just by sort of watching the internet throughout the day, there definitely is a core group of gamers, and they are known to be very vocal and sometimes a little on the complaining side, but they do come across as if they really don't know if they're really part of what Xbox One is doing. And yes, E3 is down the line. Do you think that the messaging needs to be sort of refashioned to feel more embracing of, obviously, that audience that was there for the original Xbox and was obviously there for the Xbox 360?
Yeah, well, as we heard Phil Spencer say today, Microsoft Studios is going to be bringing 15 titles to launch, half of which are new IP. And so that's something that's very important.
That's a very considerable, and it was actually a very surprising announcement, I have to say.
And we have got, and as somebody who's, sees behind the scenes of everything going on, there's a tremendous amount of activity and a tremendous amount of energy going into the content that we're going to bring at launch. In terms of, you mentioned, you said E3 is down the line. I actually think that one of the advantages of the timing of today on a broader sense is that this really is sort of a two-part party, right? So we've got today, where we're very excited to talk about and unveil Xbox One and, get, as you said, there's so much information to talk about. There's so much going on out there. And it's only 19 days down the road that we get to go to E3, where we'll see a lot more focus on games.
And it's worth pointing out, you have had the last word before E3, and we'll have the first word at E3 with the very first press conference, which I think is savvy, to say the very least. Matt, I look forward to hopefully seeing you then. I really appreciate your time.
Great, thank you.
All right, take care.
Thanks.